Alrighty, here we are. We got the 6 races. I will start with order. No offense, Claustro, my favorite. So we're gonna start with the dwarfs a little bit.
Order bias.
Yay! Right. So every race, you should know, they all have a tank, they all have a range, they all have a healer, and they all have a melee. Okay. So oh, Karishna's gonna be doing his witch elf, and what are you doing, Smite? Oh, favorite ones. Okay, that's cool. So, right, we got tanks. Ironbreaker is a nice tank for the dwarfs. As all tanks, he can be played with a shield and an axe or a hammer or two-handed as a DPS. He's a little bit more orientated towards guarding effectively one target. Usually that's a Slayer or a Witch Hunter or Shadow Warrior next to him, something like that, or a Lion. He's very good at the single target protection. And very tanky tank. Very tanky tank. I don't know, you guys, Claustro and Bombling, if you're gonna jump in when I'm talking, add anything, because you guys been playing much longer than I have.
I
Feel free.
think when we cover the classes very briefly here, let's just talk about what makes this tank different from the other two races, and what's like the class mechanic, and is this class good in small scale, in solo roaming, or is it good in warband play? And that's pretty much it for each class.
All right, we can do that. Well, the Ironbreaker. So I should go on the mechanic now, right? Should do them all and finish them.
Sounds good, yeah.
Okay, so the Ironbreaker, as you can see, has the mechanic of grudges. This tank has two pools. One is the action points, and the other one is the grudges. When he gets into combat and he hits people or he is hit by people, he builds up grudges up to 100. Half his skills, more or less, are used with action points, the other half with grudges. For example, for him to punch somebody, he must have enough grudges. So it has this duality and plays with those mechanisms. I use grudges a bit, I'll do AP. The more grudges, the more powerful the spells are. And the very unique thing he has is that he has guard, as all tanks, of course, absorb half the damage from the melee DPS, and Oathfriend. Oathfriend allows him to buff that specific player he chose with more armor, more weapon skill, some shields, and so on and so forth. And his mechanism has a counterpart on Destro, which is the Blackguard.
Welcome.
Hey, sup? Well, I think it's important to tell people about this class, man. We have a lot of people coming in, so let's have a look. Since the counterpart is the Blackguard, maybe we should do a little comparison like that.
Sounds good, yeah.
So here's the Blackguard for those interested on the dark side. Well, I'm trying to keep it simple, Lablo, because if we go in extreme detail, we're gonna end up this little podcast tomorrow night. There's a lot of depth in the classes, but just the basics a little bit help people to get the idea of it. Yes, somebody was saying.
I would say that the Ironbreaker and the Blackguard is one of the more complex tanks to play. I used to play Ironbreaker back on live, and I actually enjoy it much more than the Choosen that I'm playing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You have some more opportunities and abilities that you can use. You need to use your skills in a totally different way compared to the Choosen, and an Ironbreaker and a Blackguard is also quite good with a two-handed weapon compared to some other tanks.
Well, guys, it's nice that you're putting the extra information to the chat for the people. Keep doing that. So we'll keep it short on the talking. You do the more details there. So this is the counterpart of the IB. The same mechanism. Instead of grudges, they have hatred, and it goes on like that. So let's see the next one.
So just my finishing note on these two classes. They're two excellent tanks. They work extremely well in PvP. In RVR, they are more like small-scale focus tanks. They're very good at buffing a specific person in the group with the grudge and hatred mechanic. But when it comes to larger scale, they become a little less impactful because they only buff a single guy in a large battle. So still very good tanks. You should definitely play them if you like the looks of them and you like the mechanics. Excellent tanks.
Okay, so let's go to the healers now. We got, healers. There we go. Rune Priest. Full AP, very good healer overall. What you expect is a pure healer in the game. He does have a DPS form, but it's not really viable at the moment, I think. His counterpart, he has a lot of stuff he does. He has shields, buffing HP, AoE heals. I don't remember all of them though. But his counterpart is also falls in the Chaos this time, not the Dark Elves, and that would be the Zealot. Same thing here. They're the pure healers, I would say, in this game. Extremely useful in warbands. I think they're very good at warbands. They have almost non-stop abilities of casting AoE heals. And that's how far my knowledge goes. So I don't know if you guys want to chip in on this one a little bit.
You want to go, Claustro?
Yeah, sure. I have a Zealot my own. I usually play it as a DPS Zealot when it was viable back in the days. But in my opinion, the Rune Priest and Zealot is a quite straightforward healer. You rely on action points. You're not the tank. You need to have a good positioning and awareness. And in my opinion, the Zealot, at least, I can't speak about the Rune Priest. It was a long time ago I played one. Is an excellent kiting healer. You can use this insta heal and run and get some nice procs from it if it crits.
Yeah, pretty much the same as Claustro just said. Zealot and Rune Priest are the mobile healer. They have like the heals on wheels theme going for them. They can run while they heal and hot. So they're excellent kiters, good for if you have a very mobile group. They're good in both large scale and small scale. And the class mechanic they are buffing group members with runes or what's it called on Destro side?
Rituals. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Try and keep it short because there's a lot of classes to go through. So
Yeah, thank you guys in chat for debating and diving deeper into it. There are 24 careers and we don't have the entire
time
evening,
to
so
do
we're
them all,
keeping it
so-
brief and just what is standing out for each.
So the melee class for the dwarves is the Slayer, and it's also a big topic. I will try to keep it short. I don't want to go in an argument between Choppas and Slayers. So the Slayer is a single target or an AoE melee class. The more damage, the more he plays, he gets enraged. That's his mechanic. The higher his rage is, the more damage he deals, but also more damage he receives. Therefore, he is a little bit sensitive in incoming damage. Let me put it that way. Very powerful class. It has a lot of things: knockdown, slows, charge, healing debuffs, nice tactics. It's one of the favorite melee classes for Order when people play him. And his counterpart, like I said, is the Choppa. That is part of the Greenskins. One big difference has always been debatable. I don't want to debate it, but I'm going to mention it. Is the fact that the Slayer has an ability called Rampage. He can ignore all block parry, so he can get the damage direct into their enemies. And the Choppa has the Get to the Git, which pulls people into them. It's an AoE pull that speeds them up and deal a little bit of damage as well. Both have similar mechanisms. The Choppa one's called Berserk. He still gets more Berserk as he fights. He gets more angry. He deals more damage, receives more damage. Both classes frontliners with a guard from a tank. And they are extremely useful in warbands. I think that Destro uses them a little bit more than Order does for some reason. That's it, guys. It's up to you now.
I think Claustro got this one.
Oh, thank you. If you enjoy playing a melee frontline DPS guy, I suggest you should play either a Slayer or a Choppa. I haven't played one myself, but I think both of them looks great, and the mechanics is suitable for both the large scale and the small scale. So it's a safe pick, but you need to be prepared that you really rely on a healer and a tank to be able to survive in the front and in the enemy blob.
Yeah, Sundome, I didn't say that. I just mentioned two skills that they have that the debate going on. I didn't say which one is mirror. I said Rampage. They have Rampage to get the damages. They have Pull. I didn't say they're on the same thingy. But these are the two skills people are debating on.
You can't mention the Slayer without people going into Rampage. And you can't mention Choppa without going
Yeah,
into
that's why
Choppa.
I said
that's
it.
the reason we mentioned these two abilities.
No, they're not
classes are
mirrors.
just- The two classes are just melee DPS. They're upfront. They're very aggressive. They're super squishy when they go full enrage. So it's a risky class. It demands a lot of attention and support. So pick it wisely.
Yeah, Sandom, I agree with you. They always compare it. It's not the same. I agree with you. I just mentioned two key skills that they are very interesting into the gameplay. That's it. So going to a range class now for the dwarves. We got the engineer. That's my favorite class. That's what fixer is. I love the little buggers.
If only we had an engineer expert on this show. Do we have anyone in chat who can come and help?
We have a lot. Capacho is an engineer. I think everybody has an engineer.
Yeah, you got this one, Fixer. I was just teasing.
So here's a ranged DPS. The engineers bring a lot to any party or any warband. They are excellent marksmen on single target, high burst, long range. They can hit up to 200 feet if you play them right. They have an AoE spec which they used a lot in warbands for the massive AoE damage they have, including armor debuffs, corporeal debuff on the resistances, and the last path also gives them a big ability which brings a lot of utility into the party, increasing casting times, pulling people. They have the AoE pool of 6 people, static but still powerful. And if you see me playing them, they're not as squishy as people think, but they lose a lot of damage after that. So you can see Fixer play. Here's a tanky NG. They also bring a lot to the keep walls, where they're most likely to find them gathered. Well, yeah, they're snipers. You have Maguses on the other side to do that. And I like the engineer personally because it's extremely versatile to what he can do. Oops. A lot of grind, but still versatile. People hate the sniper NGs because they deal a lot of freaking damage. The counterpart exists in Chaos on Destro, and that is the Magus. The Magus is a little bit more shelfish. He doesn't have so much utility for the party in the warband, but still remains an excellent sniping class. He's a full spellcaster, and that's the major difference between the engineer and the Magus. The sniper, if you like sniper because it's a long range one, single target path, is a spellcasting, and they hit equally all the classes, where the engineer has to penetrate the armor because it's physical damage. That is a major difference they have. The middle path, which is the AoE, it's exactly the same on both classes, with minor difference that the Firestorm is mobile, the Phosphor Shells is not. And the last path, which is the utility, is the one that helps the Magus become tanky, get the pool, which is called Rift in this case, and that's it. But the heals he has is for him. The engineer can serve them to the party a little bit. Both excellent classes to play. I'm surprised Destro don't have more Maguses, to be honest. And that's it. This is also a very good warband or 6-man orientated class on both sides, both the NG and the Magus. However, for the rank scenario, I'm just mentioning this now, those two classes are not very favorable because of the dots. It takes a long time to build up the damage. I don't know if you guys want to add something, Claustro or Bombling?
I got nothing. You got.
Okay. Yeah, that's my favorite class, so I think I can cover that one. Yes, Claustro.
If you like supportive DPS, range DPS, I think the engineer or the Magus could be something for you in a warband setting. And at the same time, you have the option to swap into some heavy single target damage with the other trees that you can spec into. So it's a versatile class that can be used in different areas.
It's just that it doesn't have that much utility as the NG has for the parties, unfortunately. Like his heal is for him only, or the NGK can heal a little bit around. That's how they can become a little bit balanced. That the NG brings more utility, the Magus brings more DPS, and they come out in overall they're quite balanced. Because I play those two classes, I have to say they are overall balanced, and I would really encourage people, don't always look just the DPS output. It is important, but it's not everything.
I got a little general comment here. So since we have covered like 4 classes now on each realm, as some people may have noticed, there's a lot of debate going on what class is better than their counterpart. This game is not mirrored, and that's one of the charms of the game. The classes are not mirrored. Some of the abilities are mirrored on their counterparts, and some of them are like zigzag between the two realms. Like one mirror class might not have the same ability like the other class, but it might be present on some other even arch type or race.
Yeah.
So that's very important to point out, and people should just play what they enjoy. and what looks cool to them, in my opinion.
Yeah, one example is that the engineer has an AoE punt. The Magus does not, only has a single target. And then I don't think the Lion has an AoE punt, but the Squig does. This is what Claustro says, that between the Engie and the Magus, the Engie has AoE punt, Magus doesn't. But the AoE punt exists on another DPS. So overall, the sides can be balanced that way.
Yeah, and we should continue, I think.
Yep, we're going to the Knight. The Knight is the tank for the Empire. He is one of those tanks that have the mechanics commands. Basically, we call them auras. They put a lot of auras around the debuff enemies as they come in range and buff allies as they are in range, usually 100 feet. Good tank with a shield, good tank with a 200 as a DPS, good at small scale, big scale. It is one of the most favorable tanks for warbands at the moment because of the ability to buff the whole party. And the counterpart on this one is the Choosen. Similar mechanism instead of commands, they're called curses. I think they have pretty much the same skills, more or less, but I'm going to pass this one to Claustro because Choosen is his main to add anything else he wants on this one.
Yeah, I recommend you to play either a Knight or a Chosen if you like to play sword and board tanks, like defensive ones, but you also have some options to go into two-handed trees to deal some damage. It's not heavy damage, but you can consider yourself as some kind of supportive frontline DPS if you go the two-handed spec. I've played my Chosen now for a little bit over 1 year, and I can say that I fully master it now. I can press hold the line, I can use challenge, and I can press my blast wave. That's the 3 buttons you're going to use as a Chosen.
I just want to say, sorry, Bombling, I'll give you time to speak. Just want to say that some people consider tanks to be easy to play, but trust me, on this game, nothing is easy. Switching guards in combat, keeping an eye on every ally, positioning yourself right to buff people, and knowing what skill to do and when. It's never easy in this game. And if you start playing it, you'll see how hectic and how, oh shit, damage from all over the place. Who's dying? Who's doing this? It can be like that. So don't think it's just one button. Bumbling?
So I got a question. Pretend I'm a new viewer here.
Okay.
We covered the Ironbreaker and the Blackguard, and we said that those classes are more complicated and more based around buffing a single guy. So is the Knight and the Chosen the same, or how does that make these two classes stick out? Are they better for AoE buffing?
Yeah, the Chosen and the Knights has a suitable role in any warband. You should bring 3-4 of them in the 24-month setup. To utilize the Chosen and the Knight in the correct way, you need to position yourself in a defensively correct way so you can buff your group, and also you need to place yourself offensively so you can debuff, because these commands and curses also debuffs the enemy. So it's a thin line between going overly aggressive or staying way too back. I played my Ironbreaker back on live. I enjoy that class much more, to be honest, but the Chosen at the moment, since it's my main, and I feel that I can lead warbands much easier on it because it's not much to do with the rotation, but you can actually make it more complex. You have some abilities, but in a warband setting, you don't really use all these abilities because hold the line is much more important. In small scale, you can utilize much more of the capability of both the Knights and the Chosen, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a question here. Like nowadays with the Black Orc buffs, what is the point of a Blackguard? We'll get into this when we get to the Black Orcs. Okay, let's just save that question for then. Healer class for the Empire, Warrior Priest, a very interesting class, very debatable a lot of times. He is classed as a healer. He's also classed as a mechanic at Righteous Fury, which means they have two mechanisms like the Ironbreaker. They use AP for some spells for damage, and then use Righteous Fury for healing. You have to alternate between the two. There's a spell you can change between them. And they're classed as close combat healers. This is the important wording. They're close combat healers. They are melee DPS that go in the front lines, they deal damage, they buff their Righteous Fury, they heal, and they deal damage again, they heal. Sometimes they do this, sometimes they stay at the back and they just use the ability to exchange the points from action points to Righteous Fury. They have three forms. One is the DPS with the 200 that this guy's holding. They have a healing one with a book on the other hand and a single-handed. And now they have a shield, makes them a little bit tankier and survivable in combat. Excellent healers, very good with a buff that increase the wounds to the parties. They have a lot of things. Heal spec, shield spec, DPS spec. Yes, thank you, Zerg. They are wanted as healers, in my opinion, in small groups and big warbands. They have use everywhere. They have AoE cleanse, removing a lot of things. Good survivability as well. I think they survive much longer than the Zealot and the Rune Priest we've discussed earlier on. And I'm not sure how good as DPS they are, but that's a different matter. They are healers mainly, because that's what the game says. Their counterpart is the disciple of Khaine, aka as Doc with a K. As you can see, they have two swords as a DPS form, but they can also hold a chalice and a sword as a healer, or a shield and a sword. They have the same specs. They're really close to each other, in my opinion. They're also very favorable docs to the 6-man more than the warbands, but they perform well on both. Also quite resilient with a lot of cleanses and AoE. The doc is the most OP class in the game. Maybe, I don't know, Tentacle. Well, let's see what Claustro has to say about docs. Do you guys use docs on your warbands?
Yeah, at least 4 of them. You need one in each group in the 24-man setup. I would say, as a new player or returning player, if you enjoy healing in any MMORPG you've played before, I recommend you to roll either a Warrior Priest or a Doc, because it's the basic healing abilities combined with some new interesting mechanics that you get to use.
So comparing this healer class to the two healer classes we already covered, I would say this has a little bit higher skill ceiling, because if you go in melee, you will have to balance between two sources of resource management, your action points and your class mechanic. You also have to use some of your melee abilities to transfer damage into friendly healing to your defensive target. So it has a little bit of a skill ceiling. If you choose to play it as a full backline healer with a book or a chalice, it's a perfectly fine class. It's super strong, probably highest tier in all brackets of the game. It's a very nice class.
Okay, moving on to the melee class for Empire. That would be the Witch Hunter. This is your typical rogue class. Stealth, surprise attacks, knockdowns, healing debuffs, all the stuff a rogue does in every game. It's a pretty straightforward. If you play the rogue in any other game, you know what I'm talking about. And the counterpart exists on the Dark Elves. You can have a male and a female in most of the classes, but Witch Elf, only female. And that is the rogue class counterpart to the Destro side. I am not really I'm not really intimate familiar with those two classes, but what I've said is accurate. They are the typical rogue stealth class that people like. Most of them would call these two classes the assassin classes that they either kill or die.
So
Yes, Bombling?
So these are the classic combo point classes, as you know from World of Warcraft and other MMOs. You stab people in the back and you build up your combo points and you apply finishers. It's very genetic in terms of the playstyle. I would like to make a little disclaimer here that you can use these characters in large scale, but as most can assume, when you make a stealth class, those are mainly based around sneaking up on single targets and assassinating them. That's pretty much where they excel. There are some gimmick specs where you can go into large scale and be effective, but mainly focus these classes around small scale and solo ganking.
Claustro, you have something you want to add on this?
Yeah, big warning to the new players. If you play Return of Reckoning for the large scale fights, you should avoid this class. It works, but you might be disappointed when you're up at around rank 40, level 40, and you feel like you are the weak link of a warband sometimes. But I suggest all of you viewers who's listening now, there's a guy in the chat called Zerg TV. You should go into his channel and you should follow him. He's playing a witch hunter in an effective way in large scale fights in cities. So if you want to learn how to position yourself, watch his VODs, watch his live streams, and he can also help you with builds and everything.
Yes, Rasen, maybe I do need to branch out of the engineer, but my time is limited. That's why I have all these guys here. Got Claustro, I got Bombling. They're really helping with explaining things.
And thank you guys in chat for chipping in with the little more in-depth commentary without going totally crazy into a flame war.
But
My class is better than yours.
true. But let me say something else. I know Bombling is very much into detail. He has knows the workings of a lot of classes. He does this as a hobby, right? He knows a lot. But if I leave Bombling to explain the classes, honestly, we'll be here until tomorrow. Have you seen his guides? He is very good at it. So now here comes the problem, guys. Then the range spellcasting class for Empire is, guess what? Bride Wizard. Who plays the Bride Wizard? Bombling does. So Bombling, it's off to you, buddy.
Here comes the fire clown. So the Bride Wizard is the ranged DPS from the Empire. It's a magical, full offensive class. It has pretty much no defenses in terms of bringing it to a party or a warband. It brings firepower, firepower, and firepower. The class has the class mechanic of combustion. The more offensive spells you're building up, the bigger chance you have of dealing critical damage and increasing your critical damage, but you might hurt yourself. That pretty much explains that the class is not very good at soloing. It can be done pretty much with everything that we're going over with the classes. Everything can be done if you're skilled and if you practice it enough. This class is very good if you give him support, like the melee DPS classes. Even though it's a ranged class, you can play it as melee in what is referred to as AoE bombing. So that means you're going in close range as a full glass cannon. You got the proper support, and then you can start blowing people up from close range with an arsenal of very lethal spells, who might even damage yourself. So a very support-heavy class, but also a lot of fun.
Okay, and the counterpart from that exists on the Dark Elves, and that is the Sorceress, also only available on female version. So I don't know.
Yeah.
You wanna, since you quite intimate with those classes, would you like to carry on with the Sork?
So as with all of the mirrors right now, there are some
there's a male.
similarities. yeah,
I didn't know
shout out to Starbex for playing a male Sork.
I didn't know that.
Maybe one of the only guys.
Seriously, I didn't know there was a female one. Yeah, I just
So-
realized. It's
so
only the
the
Witch Elf. My bad. My bad.
So the Sorcerer is a mirror to the Bride Wizard. Once again, same class mechanic. It's building up dark matter, or dark magic. The more offensive spells you do, the bigger chance you hit yourself, and the harder you will hit the enemies. It can go ranged and melee. Both of the classes have very lethal solo single target DPS, where they can timestamp and build up a combination of both direct damage and damage over time. So you kind of snap your fingers, and then your targets explode when all the spells hit at once. Very fun classes to play, but it requires support.
Claustro, because the Sorcerer is a Destro one, would you like to add something on that one? Or for the Bride Wizard, of course.
They're quite similar. One can argue that the Sork is a little better from the distance, and the Bright Wizard is a little better on the close range when you compare the damage. If you join a so-called bombing warband or a guild who wants to do bombing warbands, the Sork and the Bright Wizard is the bread and butter for those warbands. And I believe one could argue that you should bring at least 4, 5, 6, 7, perhaps even 8 of these guys to a warband.
Do we have any higher bids in the channel?
They're useful. They're useful. I love the thing I like about the Sork though, which annoys me when I play Order, is the AoE punt on the AoE spells they have. That's thing is just fucking annoying. Oh boy, boy, boy. We go to the elves now. I know how much you guys love elves. So the tank class of the elves, Swordmaster. Ooh. Yes, somebody wants to say something? No? Okay. Sorry, I thought I heard something on Discord. All good. So the Swordmaster, guys, as you can see, this dude or dudes, there's the dude, has a big freaking sword. They can be played with a shield and a sword. They can be played with the 200, as you can see here. They're very good tanks. As a 200 so far, according to people, is the highest hitting DPS tank with a 200. Very useful in a lot of situations. It's also very favorable along with the knight for the warband. It does have a very unique mechanism as every other tank I've seen so far. The blade dance. The blade dance means that he uses skill A, and if it's successful, activates skill B, and if it's successful, activates skill 3. It's a cascade of skills, basically, and he changed the blade dance. Sometimes you will use skill A and activate 2 skills, and you have to choose, let's say, if you're going to do a knockdown or a slow, and then you go back to the first stage. It's back and forth between the different stances and dances that happens. We have a lot on order at the moment of these little guys. They're quite good in my opinion. The guys will tell you more because both Bombling and Claustro and Bombling, they run a lot of organized warbands. They play with these classes in there. They know the skills and they combine them very well. And I'm very glad that we have them here to talk about this. The counterpart of the Swordmaster is the Black Orc, right, guys?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. It's the Black Orc, this big green Hulk dude. So they have similar mechanisms. Instead of calling blade dancing, they are called brawling. And it works the same way. They do a skill successfully, they activate the next and the next. I have to admit, though, that the names of the skills of the Black Orc, they're much more fun than the Swordmaster. The plan, the big plan, the plan. I mean, when I played him originally, the Black Orc, I was confused. What fucking plan was I using? The big plan, the better plan, the awesome plan? But the Black Orcs, along with the Swordmasters, when played as a 200, is very hard hitting. They're very good at dealing damage. And as far as I can tell, when they're holding the shields, they're super tanky as well. And I'm going to pass it on to Claustro and give us some more information on the Black Orc.
From a warband point of view, I would argue that at the moment the Black Orc is the strongest tank in the game. With the recent nerfs to the Knights of the Blazing Sun, I would say that the Black Orc is the top sword and border in the game, and perhaps even the top 200 tank. I don't know much about that, to be honest, but the big thing with this green guy is that he's ugly. He has a big shield, and with this shield he can block your attacks and gain morals. And when he gains morals, he's gonna pump his you can call it ultimate abilities that you have in this game. And the third ultimate ability is 1200 AoE damage that also silence the opponent. So if you can have 8 Black Orcs pumping up to that in about 40 seconds of a fight, you can do some serious damage.
Before I give the Bombling the time to say what he wants about this class, let me just say that these dudes are fucking massive. And Rasen says, don't play with Black Orcs because they cover up your alts in the character selection screen. I mean, even now they're trying to choose one. He's off the screen. It's not that my interface is slow. Actually, in my computer, his face is cut off. They're so big. So, Bombling, the word is over to you, buddy.
So
if you
it's
want to add
ironic
something.
that I'm silenced for 5 seconds after we talk about the Black Orc M3 silencer. So yeah, in terms of the Swordmaster, I think the 200 Swordmaster on order side might be the highest DPS output 200 offensive tank because of they are dealing spirit damage instead of physical damage. I'll not dive too much into how the class performs. You guys already covered the class mechanic where you go from 3 different stances, and that makes for very engaging gameplay. If people like the idea of having a big Jedi sword and kind of be a Jedi but still look like a high elf, this might be the class for you. If you'd like to take up the entire screen, be the Black Orc.
I'm just showing going back and forth between the classes, a little spin there. Okay,
Yeah.
yes?
In a more serious note, you should run at least four of these in Destro organized warband, and one could argue that you should have perhaps even 4 swordmasters. Is that correct, Bumbling, or is it 3 enough? Or 2?
So for the large scale, most Order warbands want at least one Swordmaster in each group because they bring some group utility while they still can perform offensive and defensive roles. So it's a versatile class. The class mechanic is a hindrance to some extent, but not to any point where you wouldn't pick this class. It's a very strong class in all aspects of the game.
Okay. The healing class for the elves. There we go. We have the Archmage. The Archmage is a hybrid class. As you can see, their archetype here says healer, but they are more than that. Same as the counterpart. We'll see further down. They use action points only, but they are healers. They're very good single target healers. They have AoE, but they're really good single target healers. And they're excellent DPS if you fancy solo roaming, whatnot. Most people at the moment, they play them as a DPS because they like to play solo. But they are more than that. They have a mechanism of high magic, which means that the more they heal, they get points, and that makes their offensive spells more powerful. The dodge will tick faster. They will do more damage. They will shorten the cast time or something. For example, if the full mechanic on healing they will do a spell instantly for the damage instead of 2 seconds cast time, for example. The same works for the DPS. Once they are DPSing, they're buffing up the spells. When they use the mechanic, it goes down to 0, and then they do it again. So they play between damage and heal and damage, buffing and reducing cast times of the opposite spells they have. It's a very good class. I think personally it's underestimated as a healer on Order. I think they can perform quite well. Their counterpart is the Shaman. I personally hate the little bastards, but it is fun to play them, both of them. Both the Archmage and the Shaman, they're fun to play. Extremely mobile. They have AoE slows, AoE punts on both sides. They have similar mechanism, but this time it's called War instead of
High magic.
High magic, thank you. They have exactly similar mechanisms. They have very little differences between them as far as I'm concerned. I have played both classes a little bit. I haven't found big differences, but they are both fun to play. I think also that they're both underestimated as healers. I think there can be much more when people make out of them. So this time we'll start with Bombling to tell us what he thinks about those classes.
So if you're playing on Order side and you ever feel like you're walking in green goo on the floor, that's the result of there's a Shaman nearby spilling green shit on the floor and making you walk slower. And it's the same for the Archmage with a little purple blue thingy on the ground. No, but real talk here. These classes are excellent for solo roaming if you go hybrid or even glass cannon because you have some self-sustain and the class mechanic is not too good of a class mechanic, I'm sorry to say. But the class itself is very good because you have the arsenal of you can heal debuff, you can kind of sustain yourself a little bit with defensive and offensive morals. It makes for a really good tier 1 solo roamer, pretty much unmatched, I think, for new player. If you come into tier 4, it will require some gearing. You can still do very well in small scale on these classes. The same for if you go into a warband situation and go into large scale. It will probably not be as good as a pure healer of the 2 other races from each realm. It's more of a utility role you're slotting in with the Archmage and the Shaman. It can do some morale draining, some morale pumping. It can do the snare on the ground, control the fight. It drains some action points. It has a lot of utility. The healing numbers are lacking a little bit, and I think that's because of the class mechanic is not fully utilized when you go one path or the other, and hybrid is too nerfed because it would be too strong for solo.
I think just to add a bit in this, because I've talked with quite a few Archmages, I think when people go healing, they just do healing. They don't DPS to build up the mechanic and use it. That's why I think the numbers are lacking. I don't think a lot of people do this damage, heal, just go heal, heal, heal. I think that's why the numbers are a bit down, which makes the gameplay a lot more difficult when you need to split between the two.
Yeah, so it's a kind of an immobile AP healer, so it has long cast if you're a full healer. You stick out so much because you're this pointy elf in the backline amongst all the dwarfs. So very easy to single out the high elf compared to the little shaman hiding in the bush. But yeah, the class mechanic is probably the weak link of these two classes for large
Okay.
scale. For solo roaming, a really good class.
Claustro, you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, yes, a quick
Yes, of
conclusion.
course.
If you enjoy healing, but you want to do something else than just healing, I believe the Shaman or the Archmage could be something for you. You have some crowd control, you have some utility you can use, and adding Archmage or a Shaman to a Warband setup, you can do some cool stuff with the morals that you can bring to your setup.
Here's a question for both of you, but since Claustro, I'll ask first Claustro. Do you feel there is a need to have even one shaman or an archmage into the warband? Do you guys run one of them?
Depends on what you are up against. We tend to run at least one. I wouldn't say it's optimal, but we have this sign-up system. So if I have a shaman who signs up, we're gonna run with it. What it brings that help Destro to control the order warbands, it's the shaman puddles, those slow things that Bombling mentioned on
Yeah.
the ground. If you utilize them in a correct way, you can slow down the damage of the order warband and play around it. So it works quite well. And they also has insta-rest that we haven't mentioned, that they have a tactic that they can resurrect in combat instantly, but they will be stunned. So you can use this class in many different ways.
Okay. And we're now going for the melee class on the elves, guys. Almost done. The White Lion, I don't know what's stuck on females, but you can have both if you like. White Lion, it is a class with a pet. Guess that. Mechanism Tame Lion. Personally, I haven't played the Lion very much, but so far people hate them. Apparently, they do a lot of damage. They have a leap skill. They can jump into and knock down people. They can send the pet and fetch somebody and pull them. It's a single target pull. They can do it on the move, I believe. The pets, they can be played in both ways. They can, like, either the player, the lion cell, the white lion will do the damage and the pet will support, or the pet will do more damage and the lion, the player, will be a bit more supportive role. I think it's one of the most hated classes from Order on Destro, especially from Shaman, because they're really bursty and Shamans really hate them. And now here's my problem. Which one is the counterpart? Because I'm always confused. Is it the Squiggy or is it the Marauder?
I think we need to use the Marauder here, even
The
though it's
Marauder.
not a
Okay.
perfect
Well,
mirror.
remember, there are no mirror classes, so this is where it gets a little bit fuzzy there. The Marauder has no pet, but it does have the single pull that the lion has with the pet. They have a totally different mechanism. They use mutations. They have 3 different stances, 3 different mutations basically. One is like more DPS, one is more defensive, one is more utility. They don't have any raids, yes. They're very good. They have AoE damage. They have AoE knockdown. The single pull, some of you might have experienced already, is a little purple beam that pulls you through. They can do it on the move. For some reason, I haven't seen too many Marauders in Destro so far, but I think the population started to build now. There's always one in warbands. I think the guys will explain us why. I've always seen one, maybe 2 sometimes in the warbands. White Lions, up to recently, as far as I remember, they didn't have a lot of lions in the warbands. Recently, I've seen more and more of them. And I'm going to ask Claustro to explain to us why, and if he has to add something about the Marauders from the Destro perspective. Claustro?
I'm just gonna add something to the new players coming in about the White Lion. You will hate this class. This class will jump and pounce on you, and they will one-shot you. Don't be scared. When you grow old, you will knock them down as well. But over to the Marauder. If you compare the two classes, I would say the White Lion is the strongest single target damage dealer, and the Marauder is the more supportive AoE warband class. The Marauder is the safe pick if you want to play small scale, if you want to play large scale, and if you want to be a melee DPS. You can build this guy offensively and deal some decent damage, but mainly you will build this guy as some kind of supportive DPSer who can knock down. You can debuff different what's it called, stats. You can drain morale. You can build up cast time. You have lots and lots of tools on one guy. So I would say the Marauder is the most versatile class, DPS class on the Destro side. We are running 3 at the moment. One could argue that you can go down to 2 as well. And we are mainly doing it for the knockdown and for the moral drain. The damage is not at the level of a Sorc, uh, but it also has a good offensive moral 2 that deals damage, so you can use it in multiple ways.
Okay, Bombling.
So just to transition from these two classes into the two other like awkward mirrors, the White Lion is probably the most front-loaded burst, and what I mean by that is the class is very mobile. It's easy to chase down solo players, so it can charge at you, it can pounce at you, and it can send your pet out and fetch you back. But it doesn't bring too much utility. Whereas the Marauder, as Claustro perfectly explained, it's a powerhouse in terms of debuffing, draining, controlling, knocking down. It can even pull. It has like this tentacle arm where it can pull you in. So two very different classes. It's kind of a mirror, but when we go into the two next DPS classes from these two races, it will kind of make up for this 4-class mix.
Mm-hmm. So the next class is the Shadow Warrior. Some of you hate them, some of you love them. I don't know, take your pick. This is a physical damage ranged DPS. His mechanic is strategic maneuvers. He can switch between ranged and melee with a click of a button, to put it this way. That's why he has the sword there. At the moment, most people play them as melee DPS, close range. The assault spec, they're quite good, but very gear dependent. You have to have high renown. Well, it is classed as a ranged DPS, Grog. I know you're right, but we have to cover all the basics.
So can I take it from here?
Yes, take it from here. Fine.
So this is the bow class on order side. I know we got the engineer with the gun, but this is the bow class. So it has 3 different specializations. Either you have the bow where you stand from long distance and charge up big devastating arrows. In theory, it's kind of underperforming right now. So let this be the warning for new players. The bow dream is kind of dead on here, unfortunately. Hopefully, it's get some love soon. But you have the bow spec where you stand from long range and you kind of be like the archer in the back line, charging up big arrows. Then you have like the kiting dream of the kind of close or mid range combat. You can run and kite while you snare and you debuff and you control whoever is chasing you. And then you have the melee spec. And then if we go to Destro side, Fixer.
Yes, I'll switch to the Destro side. So counterpart Squiggy, right?
Yes.
Squiggy.
So whereas we had the bow elf with 3 stances, we had the 3 stances on the Marauder. So that's why this mirror is kind of ugly and a bit weird. Whereas the Squiggy is the pet class, and on order side we had the pet class in the White Lion. So that's why we mentioned this crossover to be like involving 4 classes. So the Squiggy is the bow class on destruction side. It has the same 3 masteries. You can be the long range, charge up big attacks, or you can be the kiting one in medium range, or you can be the melee. Melee is very awesome and disturbing at the same time, because since this is a pet class, you kind of just get eaten by one of your pets and you sit in the mouth of the pet and you become this big giant meatball looking creature. And it kind of plays the same as a white lion without being a white lion. So you can pounce on people while being in this meatball creation. You can knock them down just like the white lion can. So it's a mobile spec, just like the Shadow Warrior can go mobile and like teleport to players and knock them down and single target burst. The melee version of the bow elf, the Shadow Warrior, is very much based around single target. And the goblin archer, the Squig Herder, when you're in the melee mode, you're creating all this area damage around you. So it's not a perfect mix, and it's not a perfect match. It's just very awkward without being mirrored, but at the same time have some similarities.
All right, Claustro, your thoughts on this class?
I could also add in that the melee squig also functions a bit as a slayer, if you remember the discussion we had in the beginning of this career discussion, because you have an ability called indigestion that increases cooldowns on the enemy target, and that's on the slayer. So, as Bombling said, these mirror aren't really mirrors; they are spread over 3 classes, something like that. No offense to the Shadow Warrior players, I haven't played myself, but I would place a big warning sign on the Shadow Warrior. Play it, you might enjoy it, and you should of course play the carriers you enjoy. Uh, but it lacks in the AoE department. You will have a rough time finding spots in organized warbands. You can argue that you can bring the melee version to the 6-man groups with the gear and with the knowledge about the class. So yeah, while the Squiggy is more used than the Shadow Warrior, in my opinion. Sorry guys if I upset anyone.
No, I think that's a good disclaimer to add on. The Shadow Warrior, as we mentioned, is very much focused about a single target, and that automatically places it in a very good tier for doing small scale and assisting and debuffing. With lack of AoE, it's not so good in large scale. It can still function, but it's not that good. Squig, on the other hand, when it goes into the melee spec and does all this crazy AoE and it can debuff and pounce back and forth, very good for large scale. It might lack a little bit of burst in single target, and that's going to make it a little bit questionable for small scale. But all classes can function if you play it enough and you play around the strength and the weaknesses of the classes.
Okay, and that, guys, covers all the classes. Let me